Have you ever wondered how faithfulness can transform even the most difficult situations in life? Today we are going to learn about the journey of Joseph of Egypt, a young man who, even in the face of betrayals, injustices, and challenges, remained faithful to God and saw his story completely transformed. Get ready to dive into one of the most moving and inspiring narratives in the Bible, full of lessons that can illuminate our days and strengthen our faith. Birth and rivalry. Joseph was born into a large family. He was the second youngest of Jacob's 12 sons, also known as Israel. His mother was Rachel, Jacob's most beloved wife, and for this reason Joseph held a special place in his father's heart. From a young age he became Jacob's favorite son, who gave him a special, brightly colored tunic as a symbol of affection and distinction. This favoritism was not only visible in the tunic, but also in the way Jacob treated Joseph, which aroused envy and resentment among his older brothers. Even as a young man, Joseph demonstrated integrity and courage, reporting his brothers' wrongdoings to their father, which further increased family tension. He was a young man with a pure heart who valued truth and justice, qualities that set him apart from his brothers. Joseph's dreams. God gave Joseph two remarkable dreams that would change the course of his life. In the first, he saw sheaves of wheat in the field. His sheaf stood upright, while his brother's sheaves bowed down to his. In the second dream, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. Joseph, with innocence and sincerity, shared these dreams with his family. His brothers understood the message. Joseph would be exalted above them, which fueled even more resentment. Even Jacob, though intrigued by the dreams, kept the matter in his heart, perhaps sensing that God had a special purpose for that son. These dreams were not mere fantasies, but divine signs pointing to a future of leadership and responsibility for Joseph. Betrayal and sale as a slave. One day Jacob sent Joseph to the field to see how his brothers were, who were tending sheep far from home. When Joseph arrived, his brothers, moved by accumulated envy and hatred, planned to kill him. However, Reuben, the eldest brother, intervened and suggested that instead of killing him, they throw him into an empty cistern, intending to rescue him later. While Joseph was in the pit, some Ishmaelite merchants passed by. Judah, another brother, proposed selling him as a slave, arguing it was better to gain something than to let their own brother die. Thus Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver and taken to Egypt, where he would be resold as a slave. To hide their crime, the brothers stained Joseph's tunic with animal blood and took it to Jacob, making him believe his son had been devoured by a wild beast. Jacob was deeply saddened, while Joseph began a new stage of life, far from his family and everything he knew. In Potiphar's house, trials and faithfulness. In Egypt, Joseph was bought by Potiphar, a high official of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Although he was only a slave, God was with Joseph and everything he did prospered. Potiphar noticed the blessing that accompanied Joseph and entrusted him with the entire administration of his house, trusting him more than any other servant. Joseph proved to be a wise and honest administrator, but also a young man of great moral integrity. Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him several times, but Joseph firmly refused, saying, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" One day, as she insisted, Joseph fled, leaving his cloak in her hands. Humiliated, Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of attempted assault, and Joseph was sent to prison. Even though he was unjustly punished, Joseph did not lose faith or trust in God, knowing that his faithfulness was more important than his own freedom. In prison, new dreams and opportunities. Even in prison, Joseph remained faithful and gained the trust of the warden, who put him in charge of the other prisoners. There, Joseph met two of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, who were also imprisoned. One night, both had mysterious dreams that left them troubled. With God's help, Joseph correctly interpreted the dreams. The cupbearer would be restored to his position, while the baker would be executed. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was released, but after regaining his position, the cupbearer forgot about him for 2 years. Although it seemed that all was lost, Joseph continued to trust God, knowing that his timing is perfect and that he always has a purpose. Before Pharaoh, interpretation and promotion. 2 years later, Pharaoh had disturbing dreams. 7 fat cows were devoured by 7 thin cows, and 7 full heads of grain were consumed by 7 thin heads. None of Egypt's wise men could interpret the dreams, and Pharaoh was very worried. Then the cupbearer remembered Joseph and recommended him to Pharaoh. Joseph was brought before the king and with humility declared, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Joseph explained that the dreams meant 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. He also suggested that Pharaoh appoint a wise man to manage Egypt's resources during the years of plenty, preparing for the scarcity. Pharaoh, impressed by Joseph's wisdom and character, appointed him governor over all Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph was then 30 years old and received Pharaoh's signet ring, fine linen clothes, and a chariot as symbols of authority. He also received a wife, Asenath, with whom he had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, names that reflected his gratitude to God for making him forget his sufferings and prosper in the land of his affliction. The famine and reunion with his brothers. When famine struck the whole region, including Canaan, Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy food. Joseph, now governor, recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph decided to test them, accusing them of being spies and demanding they bring Benjamin, the youngest brother. During this process, Joseph observed his brothers' repentance, especially when Judah offered to stay as a slave in Benjamin's place. Finally, moved and emotional, Joseph revealed his identity and forgave his brothers, saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Joseph understood that God had used all the difficult circumstances to save his family and many people from famine. Family reunion in Joseph's last days. Joseph invited his entire family to live in Egypt, where they were welcomed and given fertile land in the region of Goshen. Jacob was reunited with his beloved son and spent his last years in peace. Before dying, Jacob blessed his sons and Joseph's sons, prophesying about the future of the tribes of Israel. Joseph, for his part, always maintained his faith and faithfulness to God. Before dying, he reaffirmed God's promise to bring the people of Israel back to the promised land and asked that, when that happened, they take his bones with them. Joseph lived to be 110 years old, leaving a legacy of faith, forgiveness, and faithfulness to God. Conclusion. The story of Joseph teaches us that faithfulness to God is never in vain. Even in the face of the greatest adversities, Joseph stood firm, trusted God, served with excellence, and forgave those who hurt him. His life is an invitation to trust in God's promises, persevere through difficulties, and remember that He can transform any situation for our good and for His glory. Joseph not only forgave his brothers, but also assured them that God was in control of everything that had happened. His example inspires us to live with integrity, hope, and faith, confident that God honors those who are faithful to Him. The story of Joseph reminds us that, even when we do not understand God's ways, we can trust that He has a perfect purpose for each of us. If you enjoyed this story, share this video and leave your comment about which lesson most impacted you in Joseph's journey. Remember, like Joseph, we may face challenges, but with faith and faithfulness, God can transform our lives in amazing ways. See you in the next video.